With Season 10 on the horizon, everyone is wondering what the next batch of episodes will be for this coming installment of Death Battle's lineup. This season is a bit of an interesting case too, because instead of getting hints at what certain characters we'll be seeing, we got the reveals of the winners of the Champions Ballot that took place over the course of the last few months. But as for the rest of the lineup, besides one other confirmed matchup, we don't know what we're getting. Which is why I think it would be fun to throw my hat into the ring and give some guesses as to what I think will be the next matches that will be showing up in the next season of Death Battle. As always, these are my opinions, and if I'm proven wrong leading up to the season premiere, then that's fine. Before we jump into the predictions though, let's talk about the matchups we already know are happening. By the way, this section will include a matchup outside of the ballot that has been confirmed for the season, so if you don't want to be spoiled, skip to this timestamp. Bill Cipher versus Discord. To be honest, I probably would have been happy with any of the matchups on the 2D ballot winning, but this is the only one with a character that I actually care about, so I'm fine with this. I love Gravity Falls, and Bill is probably one of my favorite cartoon villains ever, so seeing him get covered in Death Battle is going to be awesome. I hope in terms of the fight they really go out with all the crazy reality warping stuff these two can do, as it's kind of their main connective trait. Cole McGrath versus Alex Mercer. This one I have a little less investment in, and I probably would have rather had something like Kratos versus Asura or Steve versus Emmett personally, but I knew the second I saw this on the ballot, the other matchups didn't stand a chance. I haven't played either of the games that these two come from, but I can at least recognize that this is a matchup that has been requested for the last god knows how long. It's definitely up there as one of the most popular Legacy matchups, and the fact that it's finally happening is pretty awesome. Even if I would have rather had Kratos versus Asura, I think this one deserves to happen more than anything else on the ballot. Alright, this is the spoiler one. Last chance to skip to this timestamp before you're spoiled. You're still here? Alright, let's say I didn't warn you. The Chosen Undead versus the Dragonborn. Okay, unironically, I'm more excited for this than either of the ballot winners. This has the potential to be one of the most cool fights in the franchise. Since these two have such crazy magic and spell stuff they can throw back and forth, it'd be awesome. And the music potential is boundless, since Skyrim and Souls have been known to have good music from what I've been told. Plus it's introducing two new franchises into Death Battle, which is always good. And I have two friends that are on opposite sides of the matchup. Like I have a friend that's a Souls fan and a friend that's a Skyrim fan, so that'll be fun to watch this episode with. Alright, so that's the ones we know are happening. What's up for the rest of the season? Well, I'll first be going over the ones that I think are more likely to happen than others, and then I'll spitball a few other ones that might have a chance, just not as high. First up is Bowser vs. Eggman. I don't need to explain this matchup to you. You know what it is, you know why it's here. This is an extremely popular matchup, and one of the most highly requested Mario vs. Sonic matchups, and one of my most wanted matchups. This is definitely one that I can see being a finale, and that's kind of what I would prefer it to be, but it's more likely this time they'll time it around the release of the Super Mario Bros. Movie, sometime around April, something like that. Which would be pretty early in the season's run to release such a large-scale matchup. Again, I'd rather have this take place as the season finale, or at the very least, the episode before the season finale, since they tend to do pretty big matchups for those two, like Madara vs. Aizen. But, I mean, yeah, that's all I really have to say. If you want to know more about what I'd want from this fight in particular, check out my Most Wanted Death Battle video. Next up is Groove vs. Megamind. While I think the best time to do this matchup would have been last season, I still don't think it's too late to capitalize on the Megamind and Despicable Me hype that was running rampant last year. Besides that though, this is an insanely popular matchup that people have been wanting for a while, so I can definitely see this happening this season. I personally don't have any personal investment in it. I didn't watch Megamind till like last year, and I've never really cared for the Despicable Me movies, but, you know, if this happened, it'd be fun, like it'd be funny. There's definitely going to be like some great banter in there, and, you know, it just sounds like a fun time. Next up is Ash Ketchum versus Yukimoto. Out of all the ones on this prediction list, this is definitely the one I feel most confident about. The cast had already said that they were interested in doing this matchup, like, I think a year ago it was when that episode came out. And with Ash finally completing his 25-year-long anime journey, the timing has never been better for him to finally show up in a Death Battle episode. You could also view it as a nice tribute to the mangaka of Yu-Gi-Oh! Who tragically passed away last year. Not in like a scummy way, obviously. This is definitely one I've seen most people speculating about from other prediction videos, And honestly, I hope it happens. This is the perfect time to make it, with Ash being retired and all. And it also just sounds like fun with all the monsters running around, like all of Ash's Pokemon and all of Yugi's monsters and whatnot. Just sounds like fun. Next up, we are definitely going to be getting a Jujutsu Kaisen versus Chainsaw Man matchup. Either Yuji versus Denji or Gojo versus Makima. My bet is on Gojo versus Makima, since that seems to be the more popular one. I knew it was popular like a year ago. I don't know if it's still as popular now, but I know it was like big when Chainsaw Man was coming out. As for why they do this, it's like a no-brainer. Chainsaw Man and Jujutsu Kaisen have been getting really popular, especially last year. And with the anime of Chainsaw Man coming out, and I think the mangaka saying for Jujutsu Kaisen that it's going to be ending sometime this year, this is definitely the best time to be doing an episode with these two. And since there's already two matchups that kind of link them together, it makes sense to do one or the other. But again, I think Gojo versus Makima is more likely because I think there's more fight potential with the domain expansion. And Makima, I haven't read Chainsaw Man, so I can't really say on... I don't even know what Makima does. I haven't gotten that far. But I think this one is definitely the most likely. Next up for the Halloween fight, I'm predicting Freddy Krueger versus Pennywise. This is basically the last remaining horror fight with remaining iconic horror villains. Unless they want to use, like, Leatherface or something. I don't know. But this is one horror-related matchup that I can definitely say has a good chance of happening. Though, maybe we'll get, like, a Five Nights at Freddy's matchup instead. I don't think the movie's coming out this year. I don't think it's coming out till next year. Personally, I'd like a FNAF matchup instead. Seeing something like Sully versus Glamrock Freddy would be pretty cool. Personally, I would like to see Freddy versus Springtrap instead of Freddy versus Pennywise. Though I think Springtrap versus Chucky is more likely. Scarecrow versus Mysterio also has a pretty good shot. But I think out of all the options, Freddy Krueger versus Pennywise has the best chance. This next one's also a pretty big no-brainer. Ant-Man vs. the Atom, I think, has a really high chance of coming out this year. This is basically one of the last remaining Marvel vs. DC matchups that, from my understanding, people actually want to see. And with the new Ant-Man movie coming out this year, this is the best opportunity they have to make it happen. I personally really like this matchup. I think it has a lot of potential for fun fight choreography and just like fun banter and stuff. It overall could just be really fun time, so I hope it happens this year, if anything. Alright, those are the ones that I think actually have some merit to them. Now time for a bunch of fights that have a little bit less weight behind them in terms of evidence to support it, but are fights that I still think have a small chance to happen. Still a chance, but still slightly less. Firstly, Percy Jackson versus Harry Potter. Okay, before you click off, I know this just sounds like me throwing my most wanted matchup in here for the sake of it, but hear me out. Harry Potter is a character that definitely is popular enough to warrant a return. And since there's a new Percy Jackson book coming out this year, and Hogwarts Legacy coming out this year, maybe there's a chance that it could happen this season? Obviously, this is massive cope, and if Percy is to ever get into Death Battle, he would likely debut next season, since the Disney Plus series comes out that year. Plus, judging by how they briefly mentioned Percy in one episode of the Death Battle cast, it doesn't sound like they'd considered Percy before. And at that point, I think they'd have the entire episode list down by that point. Again, I could be wrong, but this is definitely more of a cope entry than anything. Next is Rengoku vs. Mirio. This is another matchup that's gotten really popular recently, and with My Hero Academia and Demon Slayer getting new seasons recently, now seems like a good a time as any. Especially with Tanjiro vs. Jonathan and Deku vs. Asta being as successful as they were. Despite my lack of interest in My Hero, I wouldn't mind this episode happening. It's one of the few matchups from that series that I actually care about. And Mirio is one of the few characters in that show that I like. And Rengoku was cool while he lasted, so if this came out, I'd be happy. Indiana Jones vs. Jack Sparrow is another matchup that I think has a chance. What with the release of the new movie coming out this year and whatnot. Personally, I love this matchup and I think it would be very fun. But this one's definitely a bit more of a stretch considering I can't think of anyone that's actually thought about Pirates of the Caribbean recently. But I don't know, I could be surprised. Now moving on to just general franchise stuff, I think it's possible for us to get a matchup involving The Mandalorian this year, with the new season of a show on the rise coming up. Personally, I don't know who he'd fight though. I think his best matchup was the Predator, but Boba already fought him. Another matchup I saw was the Goblin Slayer, but I haven't seen that show so I can't comment on if that's accurate or not. Realistically, I think they'd want to wait until after the season comes out completely to do a matchup on him, just so they're not missing anything. So, similar to Percy Jackson, it's likely he'll debut in next season rather than this coming one. A One Piece matchup is also pretty likely, I'd say, with the conclusion of Wano happening sometime this year of the anime probably, and with the new movie coming out. Or it's already been out for a while. I imagine it'll be something like Whitebeard versus Escanor, since that's a matchup that's been popular for a while. Or maybe Kaido versus Acnologia, I think that's how you say it. Since Wano's concluding, it would make sense to do something with Kaido. I don't think we'll be getting a Luffy matchup this season, though, because Luffy's bound to get stronger as One Piece progresses for the next, 5 to 10 years. So, if they do a matchup with him now, it'll be a Death Battle Curse situation like what happened with Goku. It's not impossible, but I don't think it's very likely. Whitebeard versus Escanor, I think, has the best chance. Also, with the release of Across the Spider-Verse and the new Spider-Man game, I think there's definitely a chance we might get a Spider-Man related matchup this season. This one's a bit of a stretch. I don't even know who Spider-Man would fight if he came back. Only one that comes to mind is Miraculous Ladybug, which, no. In terms of other games and movies and other media coming out this year, Fire Emblem, Zelda, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Transformers, Street Fighter, and Resident Evil all have something coming out this year. So there's equal opportunity for each franchise to get a matchup coming out this season, though some are more or less likely than others. Bleach also has a good chance with the 1000 Year Blood War arc being super popular right now. These are all just shots in the dark in case you couldn't tell. I'll just pick some matchups from these franchises so I can complete the theoretical season list. If I get all of these wrong, then that's totally fine and completely expected. I'm not good at predicting things. From Transformers, we have Megatron versus Frieza. From my knowledge, this is one of the more popular Transformers matchups that isn't Galactus versus Unicron, and I think this one's a bit more likely to happen than something like Primal versus Mega Man X, because Frieza's gotten pretty popular recently thanks to his new appearance in the manga, even though it would make more sense to do Primal versus X since the new Transformer movies revolve around the Beast Transformers, from my understanding. I don't know anything about Transformers. If I'm wrong about that, then that's totally fine. My bad. From Zelda, I think it's very likely we'll get something from this franchise, but I'm not really sure what, since they've already done Link during Season 8, and I don't think they're going to bring back Ganon, since they've already done his better matchups. If I were to guess, I'd say something like Zelda versus Lucina, maybe, since they'd already talked about that on the Death Battle cast, and it would kill two birds with one stone when making a matchup based on two games coming out this year. But it just doesn't strike me as a matchup that people would be pumping their fists for, being like, yeah, Zelda versus Lucina. I mean, I know people want to see Fire Emblem on Death Battle, but that doesn't seem like the matchup that people, Fire Emblem fans in particular, would want to see debut their franchise. I mean, I could be wrong. They debuted freaking League of Legends with Jinx, so anything's possible. I'm just saying I don't think it's very likely. I think they might do something else. And lastly, coming back to the Spider-Man thing, I think the two most likely matchups related to Spider-Man are either Spider-Man versus Ladybug or a live-action Spider-Man Battle Royale. And honestly, I'm putting my money on the Battle Royale since I really don't want them to do a Spidey versus Ladybug. Because I just don't like it. I don't like it. So, I completely forgot about this matchup until I had already sat down to edit, and I was halfway through editing this video, until I remembered Luz versus Anne from Owl House and Amphibia respectively, and I kind of slapped myself, because I feel like that one was another big no-brainer since Owl House and Amphibia were really popular for the last, I want to say 2 years, and since Owl House, pretty sure it ended this week or last week as I'm recording this, so I think next season is definitely the season to do that. This won't be on the final season list because I was already so far into I've already recorded everything and I'm already halfway through editing, but I do think this is more likely than some of the other matchups that I'm putting on that list. But since I've already had that all thing planned out, I'm just gonna go with what I already had written. But just let it be known, I wouldn't be surprised if this matchup got confirmed for this season. Do I care? Not really. I haven't seen either show yet. I want to watch Amphibia. I'm not really that interested in the Owl House. The villain looks cool, though. I mainly just want to watch Amphibia just because I want to see the connections between Asgore and Andreas, because I like that matchup. Yeah, Luz versus Anne. Sorry about that. Alright, that's my guess of what the next season will look like. If I were to guess the order they'd come in, Ant-Man vs. the Atom starting off the season makes a lot of sense to me. It's a simple Marvel vs. DC matchup that has a lot of fun fight potential, and it'll come out a month after Ant-Man's new movie, which releases in February, and Death Battle seasons usually premiere in March. Rengoku vs. Mirio following it up seems appropriate as well. It's a fun anime fight with two characters everyone likes. I can see the two champion ballad fights being split between the two halves of the season as well. You can probably put these anywhere on the list, but I think it makes sense to have one be relatively early, like third, in the list, and then have the second one premiere the second half of the season. I think you could put the two of them in either of these positions, but I think it makes sense for me to put Cole versus Alex first, and then have Bill versus Discord premiere the second half. Zelda vs. Lucina and Jones vs. Sparrow, you time around their respective movies/games coming out, so somewhere during the spring months. And then just throw Groove vs. Megamind in the middle, I don't know. Then putting the Chosen Undead versus the Dragonborn right before the end of the first half of the season makes sense. It's not really lined up with any new release or anything, so you could just put it wherever, really. And I think ending the first half with Frieza vs. Megatron makes sense. Not only does it line up with the release of the new movie, the Transformers movie, but it's also a hype match to end the first half off. Then you open the season back up with Bill vs. Discord, and then you follow up with Percy vs. Harry to line up with the new book for Percy. Then Gojo vs. Makima, since the mangaka hinted that the manga would end sometime around 2023, so putting it near the end of the year makes sense. Then the movie Spider-Man Battle Royale to line up with the new game, or you could put it at the beginning to line up with Spider-Verse, either or. Then Freddy vs. Pennywise for the Halloween matchup, Ash vs. Yugi, then Whitebeard vs. Escanor, since you always want to put a hype, or at least popular match, as the second to last episode. Then Bowser vs. Eggman to close out the season. Though I think it's also equally as likely to have Bowser vs. Eggman as the premiere, since it'll line up better with the Mario movie. But personally, I think this matchup works better as a finale, so that's where I'm putting it. Alright, that was my predictions for the 10th season of Death Battle. Honestly, with how good Season 9 was last year, I'm super excited to see what Season 10 has to offer. They seem to have a theme with each new season. Season 8 was a collection of legacy matchups, and Season 9 was about bringing in new franchises and trying different types of stuff. So, maybe with this champion ballad being a big thing for this season, maybe this season's gimmick will be doing a bunch of really popular, long requested matchups? I don't know, I'm just throwing things out here. Anyway, that's all from me. This is a nice change of pace from the Season 9 ranking, just doing a more laid-back video that isn't an hour long. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you all later.